attending in person in the committee room and appearing virtually. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to take a few moments to review with you. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. For those participating virtually, please use the raised hand icon. Before speaking, click on the microphone to activate your own mic. In the committee room, the microphones will be controlled by the proceedings verification officer. I and the clerk will manage the speaking order. You may speak in the official language of your choice. I would ask you to speak slowly so that the translators have the ability to interpret you correctly. If something happens with translation services during the meeting, please get my attention and we will suspend while they are being clarified. Again, unless if you're appearing virtually and are not using a House of Commons approved headset microphone, then I will not recognize you to participate in the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, November 21st, 2022, the committee will commence its study of the National Housing Strategy. I would like to inform all members that the witnesses appearing virtually today have completed the technical connectivity and equipment test. I would like to welcome our witness to begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks followed by questions. Today, from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Rami Bowers, President and Chief Executive Officer. Nadine LeBlanc, Senior Vice President Policy. Carla Star-Esnia, Vice President Risk Management Strategy and Products. Bob Dugan, Chief Economist. Simon Lahoud, Director, Financing Solutions, and Yannick Monahan, Director, Client Solutions. Before we begin, I just want to welcome, we have Ms. Lapointe substituting for Mr. Long, and we have Ms. Kwan, who is accompanying Madame Chabot on today's. Sorry. I do this all the time, accompanying Madame Zarillo on in today's committee meeting. So welcome to Ms. Kwan and Madame Lapointe online. So we will start with Ms. Bowers for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy to be meeting with you today on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Nishnawbe peoples. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation. We're always very happy to participate in this very important part of the democratic process and speak about the work that we're doing at CMHC. I understand that timing issues made it impossible for us to testify here last week, and I'd like to apologize for this. We never shy away from committee appearances, and just last week I met the Public Accounts Committee, and next week I'll be back at this committee with the Minister. En tant qu'Agence nationale du logement.
As Canada's National Housing Agency, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is pleased to be delivering the National Housing Strategy. This 10-year plan is Canada's first national comprehensive strategy to address housing unaffordability. It includes a suite of programs designed primarily to create more housing supply. It focuses first and foremost on the most vulnerable Canadians, but it covers the continuum of housing. For example, shelters, community housing, market rentals, as well as home ownership. At CMHC, we leverage our close partnerships with the housing sector and all orders of government to make sure that federal investments are optimized for the greatest impact. We're continually improving our programs based on feedback from our partners. For example, We recently streamlined the process of our National Housing Co-Investment Fund and reduced the turnaround time for applications by 50%.
Learned to new programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative. This highly successful program is expected to quickly create more than 14,500 units for people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. CMHC has continuously met the National Housing Strategy's ambitious targets, and we've added new programs as conditions and needs continue to evolve. The result is that to date, we have made more than $30.28 billion in financial commitments to support the creation and repair of 387,000 units, 170,000 of which are currently under construction or completed, and the continuing availability of more than 38,000 community housing units where operating agreements expired. These indicators are publicly available on our website. We are committed to continually improving our reporting to ensure public investments are delivering real impact to Canadians who need it most. At the same time, we continue to gather and share information on the housing environment and housing needs of all Canadians. The numbers that I've just cited demonstrate our impact, but so do the stories of the people who now have a home as a result of this work. People like Emily from Vancouver, who was homeless and struggled with addictions. She found a home at Union Gospel Mission's Women and Family Center, and she says that the support that she received there changed her life. The center was built with funding from the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. Or another example, take Bill, a Canadian Forces veteran in Ottawa. Bill went from being homeless to living in Veterans House, a supportive housing facility at the former CFB Rockcliffe Air Base. The project was also financed by the Co-Investment Fund. There are also the seniors, people living with disabilities or with mental health issues in Gravenhurst, who will soon have a home at the brand new Alexander Retirement Care Centre, again thanks to the Co-Investment Fund. It is clear from stories like this that the National Housing Strategy is making a difference in the lives of Canadians. But this is not to say that much more needs to be done to address Canada's housing challenges. And government can't do it alone. There simply aren't the resources in government to address the housing needs of all Canadians. Yes, there is definitely a clear role for government at all levels when it comes to ensuring that vulnerable people can meet their basic housing needs by creating more affordable or social housing. But when it comes to solving Canada's more widespread housing affordability challenges, the impact of federal investments is much more limited. For example, in Canada, about 95% of rental housing is provided by the private sector. So in thinking about housing affordability, the private sector needs to be part of the solution. We are very happy to be here today to answer your questions, and we welcome all ideas and how we can work better together to ensure that everyone in Canada has an affordable, suitable home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. We will now open the floor to questions and discussion, beginning with Mr. Aitchison for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Bowers, thank you very much for being here, along with your army of support. We appreciate that. I just want to set the base here a little bit. So the CMHC is the lead agency for the National Housing Strategy, correct? So I read in the 2021 final evaluation report on the National Housing Co-Investment Fund that the program supports the creation of new affordable housing stock and also the repair of existing housing stock. That's also correct? That's the program? So what's troubling, though, is that in the Auditor General's report that we just received, the Auditor General reported that rental housing units considered affordable and approved under this program were often, and I quote, were often unaffordable for low-income households across Canada in 2019. How do we reconcile the fact that The program is to construct and repair affordable rental units, which is a defined number, with the Auditor General's report that says they are often not affordable.
Mr. Chair, first I'd like to thank the Auditor General for the comments made in that audit.
So your microphone is not on, so.
First, I'd like to thank the Auditor General for the comments made in that audit report. CMHC has accepted all the recommendations, and we are judiciously working on the action plans. With respect to the question, the National Housing Strategy is, although it is focused on vulnerable populations, it has a number of programs that serves the housing needs of all Canadians. So the affordability that's achieved through the different programs depends on the intent of the program. So, for example, we have a program called the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, which is intended to provide market housing supply or units that's slightly below supply. So the affordability definition for that would be very different than something like the Rapid Housing Initiative, which is geared towards those experiencing homelessness.
Okay,
and therefore,
I'm gonna stop you there. I don't want you to describe all 6 of the programs, because I know that the program, the National Housing Strategy, is broken up into a lot of different categories. I get that. But very specifically, this was a report on the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, which is specifically for affordable rentals. And the AG has reported that that program specifically often produced or delivered units that were not actually affordable. I'm asking very specifically, how do we reconcile that? Is it, I mean, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm just curious to know what it is.
turn it over to my colleague Simon to answer specifically on the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. But I'd like to note that the National Housing Co-Investment Fund often supports mixed income units. So we have some units that are affordable and others that are more close to market. And the idea is that the more market oriented rents support those that are more deeply affordable. But I'm going to turn to Yannick because he has the sort of the details on the affordability achieved through that program, and maybe Yannick, you can give the chair some indication of the level of affordability achieved to date.
Sorry, Romy, I'll jump in there.
Oh, sorry, Simon. Apologies. Wrong person.
That's okay. Thank you. So as Romy mentioned, our program is definitely meant to achieve different levels of affordability. Our program criteria defines affordability as units that are at or below 80% median market rent, and our program criteria requires at least 30% of the units to be affordable.
Okay, I'm going to stop you. Sorry, please stop. I don't need you to explain to me how the programs work and what affordability is. We get that. I'm talking about very specifically this program that is supposed to deliver affordable rental units. The Auditor General has reported that in many cases they were not affordable. I want to know specifically what caused that. Not that there's a dozen different programs. We know that. What specifically? You were burning up a lot of my time here.
The Auditor General was focused on chronic homelessness, and she applied the affordability lens of homelessness to all our programs. So when you look at something like the Rapid Housing Initiative, it produces the most number of units that are deeply affordable. When you look at something like the co-investment funds, some units are affordable for those most in needs and others are not. And that is by policy intent.
But the Auditor General specifically said the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, which is for affordable units, did not deliver always affordable units. There must be a reason for that. That's all I'm asking.
It produces a mix of affordable units depending on the individuals or communities being targeted with a particular
But she
project.
says a lot of them were, she says that some of them were not actually affordable.
And that
affordable.
that was by policy intent. It produces mixed income communities with some deeply affordable units and others that are less deeply affordable.
Okay. All right. So if there's a mix, then the definition of affordable rental is that the household spends 30% before tax income spent on rents, less than 30%. Is that correct?
That is one definition of affordability.
Okay. So we have multiple definitions in this country of what affordable is?
As I mentioned, given the nature of the programs, we have different affordability definitions depending on the type of housing that we're trying to create.
Is that part of the reason why we can't quantify whether these programs are really, truly helping always? I mean, I know we're having some anecdotal support here, but is that one of the reasons why the Auditor General couldn't measure whether these programs were working or not? we have different definitions depending on, I guess, who you're talking to?
So we are doing work to make the affordability definitions more aligned and readily understandable to Canadians. I think there is definitely work that CMHC can do. I think having different affordability definitions has created confusions, and I definitely take that feedback. But in terms of keeping track of affordable units, we do keep track of the units that are being created, the targeted populations, and the level of rents that are being achieved. Many of the units are still under construction, so it takes time between funding and the actual move-in date, and that creates a delay in our reporting, but we're working really hard to make that delay as short as possible.
Aitchison, I'm sure you will get back in the rounds. We have almost 2 hours. Mr. Collins, for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you, thanks to the representatives for attending this afternoon. Very basic question. How does CMHC measure success as it relates to all the programs that you have? What data or what information are you using to determine whether the programs are working or not from your perspective as an organization?
For each program, there are defined program unit limits, populations that are being served, level of affordability, and we make a concerted effort to collect that information on an ongoing basis. There are some targets at the sort of top level for NHS as a whole. For example, number of units created, number of households that are taken out of household needs, number of women who are being served by the housing units. So all that information is available on our Place to Call Home website. We try to update as frequently as we can to create as much transparency as we can about the investments being made and the impact that it's having in the communities.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. I think as a longtime city councillor in Hamilton, I think everyone on my council, irrespective of their political stripe, celebrated the National Housing Strategy and the investments that came with it. I think, if you were to poll those people, not just in Hamilton, but I think across the country, I think most people would think, and I think to the member's point prior to mine, I think most people would expected more for those that are in core housing need. And so I think we expected more on the subsidy side of things, addressing housing needs for those seniors, those who are disabled, veterans. You have the list of the vulnerable populations that the National Housing Strategy seeks to assist. I think we expected more there and less on the market side. And so I agree with you in your opening comments where you said there's room for the private sector, and I'll have questions for that later today. But on the issue of subsidy and deeply affordable units, how do we change, to your words, with the previous members, the policy direction? When do we look at the National Housing Strategy and say, look, pandemic's changed a lot of things, it's time to maybe push a reset button, we need deeply affordable units, less support for market rents? Can you help me with that in terms of how we can assist you in that regard?
I view the National Housing Strategy as an evergreen strategy. It started out as a $40 billion investment in housing. It's grown to a $72 billion investment over the last 5 years based on response to the changing housing needs of Canadians. One of the most recent successes of the National Housing Strategy has been the Rapid Housing Initiative. It started out as a $2.5 billion initiative during the pandemic to address the housing needs of those most in need. It was $2.5 billion. It was 100% grant, no loans. We recently launched round 3 of that initiative, which provides another $1.5 billion in grant funding to create another 4,500 units of housing. So that's an example of the flexibility of the housing strategy and how it changes as circumstances change.
I agree with you. I think Rapid Housing, through you, Mr. Chair, is the most successful program that we have under the strategy. I think we need to model some of the other programs after it in terms of providing more affordable units to the vulnerable population across the country. On the issue of the financialization of housing, we're going to study that next, and maybe you'll be a part of that study as well. We've seen a lot of information out in the public as it relates to the loss of affordable units. They've been scooped up by the private sector. Some of those units have been scooped up by private individuals who are tinkering as a landlord in the market. And others are larger companies like REITs who've scooped up hundreds, if not thousands, of units across the country in all areas of the country. And in some areas, those REITs almost have a monopoly, depending on the size of the community, they almost have a monopoly on the rental market. And we've seen an escalation of rents as a result of those purchases. Can I ask, does CMHC disclose the supports that it provides to REITs, whether it be through mortgages or applications through some of the programs that you've already highlighted this afternoon?
Mr. Chair, one point I'd like to highlight is through the National Housing Strategy, we support all types of housing developers. We provide grants only to nonprofit housing providers and the government. We provide loans in some cases to private developers. I'm not aware of, I don't have the exact numbers of the breakdown you're talking about, but we can certainly provide that. With respect on the subject of the financialization of housing and the role of private sector actors, especially in the rental sector, if we have time, I would like to give the floor to our chief economist, who might be able to provide a little bit more insights here, if you're agreeable. So, Bob, do you mind just talking about your observations about the financialization of housing and just the dynamics of the housing sector?
Absolutely, and thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. The financialization of housing is a word we hear a lot, but the reality in Canada is about 95% of the rental market is provided by the private sector. And so financial is something that exists by design in our rental market. And so in an environment of, a growing population and more demands, for more rental units, we need, more financialization in order to sort of get more supply in order to meet the needs of a growing population. We've done some work in our rental market survey to try to measure the extent to which REITs and other types of investors are present in the market. And our best estimates is REITs account for about 10 to 15% of landlords in the rental market. So they're not a monopoly. They're sort of a smallish player. But they're a player amongst other private investors, which make up, again, as I said, most of the units or the ownership of most of the rental units in the rental markets across the country. And so, to the extent that units are being scooped up, I don't think they're being scooped up from, private sector investors buying them away from the government. What it is maybe private sector owners selling to other private sector owners. But, the market is overwhelmingly privately owned in Canada. There is a role for the government, of course, as well, but that's just the way our system is designed and how we supply housing. I mean, we could, always entertain ways of changing those proportions, but that's sort of how it is right now.
Mr. Chair, I do have a list of questions I will submit to the clerk just for the committee's information.
Thank you, and that's a good way of using your time efficiently, is providing written questions through the clerk to the thing. No, is valid. Now, Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. This is a major study. Another one will be required because when it comes to social housing and affordable housing, I think we do have the duty to achieve results. We have a duty to achieve results because in all of our writings, first and foremost, there is the issue of available, affordable housing as well as social housing, and that is a crisis that exists across the board. When we started this study, we did not have the Auditor General's report yet, and it is quite troubling because what we have learned is that CMHC does not know whether or not vulnerable persons are the ones who really are now in housing that has been supported by this initiative. In fact, some studies show that apparently only 5%, and again, I have it here, that rather less than 5% of new housing units that are being built, thanks to the two main projects of the strategy, are accessible to persons who have the most obvious needs. And that's quite troubling. And I'm not trying to point that finger at anybody. What I'm trying to get at is to get answers. How can we better support and to make sure that we have updated data in hand to meet with these needs, which fall under your responsibility as program managers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. As I mentioned previously, we are very grateful for the Auditor General for her comments and that we've agreed to an action plan to address the deficiencies that have been identified in the report. On the first subject of CMHC not being aware of the vulnerable populations that are being served in the unit, we do collect information at the application stage and prioritize applications on the vulnerable groups that are being that are being served. There is a delay, however, between the construction of the unit and the move-in time. So sometimes we cannot provide concrete information about who is actually living in a specific unit because of the nature of the construction cycle. We are trying to improve our reporting to be more timely. In addition to that, as I was mentioned in the response to the Auditor General's report, we are working with Statistics Canada to do more detailed reporting about vulnerable groups without sacrificing the privacy issues of certain populations. With respect to social housing,
Oui, mais là, je comprends que les...
I understand that the data was not obtained on town, but behind it there are persons. And there are persons who I think should not be deprived due to the length of time it takes to obtain data and the accessibility of data for us to meet with their objectives. So my question is this. How can we meet with that objective on time, and how can we ensure this? Because it is your responsibility to ensure that this be done. Currently, we're not even in a position to know whether or not affordable housing units are affordable according to your definitions. So you agree with the Auditor General, but yes, how do you intend to meet with this main recommendations which state that we have missed our target?
Mr. Chair, the National Housing Strategy is very significant because it reflects a return of the federal government to investing in social housing after an absence of many decades. In answer to the question from Madame Chabot, the best way to address housing for those most in need is investing in programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative, housing programs that are rich in grants that target vulnerable populations. For example, the Rapid Housing Initiative has resulted in the funding of over 10,000 new housing units. Many of them are perfectly suitable for those experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Those are the kind of programs that will best address those most in need.
Est-ce que vous pourriez nous dire...
Could you tell us how many units, social units, have been built? That is, people are occupying these housing units in Canada at this time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pass the floor to Nadine LeBlanc, who will be best positioned to answer this question.
Alors, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, allow me to mention that through the National Housing Strategy, we've built 47,000 affordable housing units. So we are at 50% of our target, our objectives, and we are now halfway through the years that we have to deliver on this strategy. I'd also like to note, when it comes to social housing, we have long-term agreements in place with the provinces and the territories. So we will be supporting over 300,000 housing units and support, as you've mentioned, those individuals who stand behind these housing units. Thanks to a number of 2022 budgets, we've increased this. It can't be 300,000 social housing units that have been built and that are already occupied. I mean individuals. Let's specify individuals for those involved in our long-term agreements.
Madame Kwan, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the representatives from CMHC to be here today. My first question actually ties into the National Housing Co-Investment Fund initiative. The average rental price of units approved under the National Housing Co-Investment Fund was higher than that of the 30% of households before tax income in several of the provinces and territories. The Auditor General, in fact, cites, and I quote, having affordability criteria linked to the market rent will continue to produce housing that is unaffordable to many of these groups. So my question is, why did the National Housing Co-Investment Fund use a different affordability measure based on 80% of the average market rent than the criteria used by the National Housing Strategy overall, which uses 30% of a household's before tax income? Who made that decision?
Mr. Chair, there are a number of different programs under the National Housing Strategy.
Sorry, co-investment fund very specifically.
And under the co-investment, I'm going to turn it over to Simon Lahoud, who's going to give a little bit more information about the affordability. But that affordability is part of the program design intended to meet certain policy objectives. And as I mentioned, the co-investment fund funds deeply affordable housing, but it also provides support for market housing so that the different levels of rent can offset each other to provide projects that are financially viable for the proponents.
Thank you, Romy. Just
I can get you to expand on that.
absolutely. Just 2 points I'd like to make. 74% of the units that we have committed funding to have actually met and exceeded our affordability criteria. In terms of depth, we are actually at 57% of median market rent.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt here for a second Mr. Chair. Perhaps we can get the data, because I think we're just walking around in circles here, and I would appreciate in actually getting the data with respect to the units that's been funded under the co-investment fund that receive what affordability criteria. So in other words, how many units receive 80% of our average market rent in that category, broken down by the year to which the program rolled out and the provinces and territories. And then I would also like to get the information on how many units similarly use the 30% of the household's total income. And so that we can get a breakdown of actually what went down, because talking around in circle does not help. And then finally, I would like to know at what juncture, who made the decision on that affordability criteria for the co-investment fund? Because the target of the co-investment fund was supposed to be for 30% of total income. That was supposed to be the affordability criteria, but somehow it's shifted. And is it a wonder the Auditor General found that the program actually did not meet the affordability needs of the people who needed them the most? So if I could get that information, I would very much appreciate that. And I can just get a confirmation if I can get that data.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question, and we'll provide the data as requested. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Now, on a different question, with respect to the Rapid Housing Initiative and the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, both of these programs, the Auditor General indicated the corporation knew the housing types likely to benefit vulnerable groups, such as transitional and supportive housing, were being funded. The corporation did not know whether priority vulnerable groups who were intended to benefit from approved projects were actually housed once projects were completed. So if CMHC could table this information, what data does CMHC have regarding who was housed under the National Housing Strategy programs, specifically related to the 6 programs audited by the Auditor General, under which the government has spent $4.5 billion? The Auditor General report also revealed that CMHC didn't know whether projects intended for priority vulnerable groups, such as people with disabilities, were actually housing these priority groups. So my question is, if we can also get a breakdown then of those units, how many of those units were targeted and housed for people living with disabilities?
We'd be very pleased to provide that information. I would like to note, however, that the construction cycles are long. It takes some time from funding to first occupancy, and we are dependent on proponents for getting the information. As soon as that information is available, we do provide it publicly, but I just wanted to note that there is a delay in receipt of the information in some circumstances.
Fair enough. With respect to the data, if we can get the information that indicates which units have been occupied, and completed and occupied, and what that data looks like, and the occupation date, so that we know actually when the project was completed and when it was occupied, and then the projects that were not yet completed or have not yet been completed and therefore not occupied, and for that data to be yet to be coming, and when's the projected timeline of when the project would be completed, so then we can anticipate when that information would be made available and when it is available to be provided to the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan. I'll let Ms. Bowers respond to your question to confirm that, and your time is out.
Yeah. Mr. Chair will provide the information requested to the extent that it's available to us, and we'll provide it on a continuous basis so that the committee has the full data that we have at our disposal.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Ms. Kwan.
Mr. Chair, just for a point of clarification, when Ms. Bauer says that to the extent to which the information is available to them, if the information is not available, I think the committee would appreciate receiving the reason why it's not available.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan.
Point
Ms.
taken.
Bowers. Now, Ms. Gray for 5 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Just to tag on to that, I just want to get clarification that any reports or any information that any member is asking for here today, that would be available, that would come to the committee before the next meeting of CMHC, before you come to the next committee meeting in the new year. Great. Can you state that for the record?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. My first question is, have you had a CMHC board meeting since the Auditor General released her report on chronic homelessness on November 15th?
We had a board meeting at the end of November.
Was that a regularly scheduled board meeting, or was that an emergency meeting that was called because of the Auditor General's report?
It was a regularly scheduled board meeting.
Great, thank you. And were there questions that were asked of you from the board members on the Auditor General's report? Was it a topic of discussion at that board meeting?
It was a topic of discussion, and I confirmed to the board that I agreed with the recommendations made by the Auditor General and was committed to the action plans that were articulated in that report.
In your response to the Auditor General, the CMHC said that the, quote, CMHC is the lead and accountable for the National Housing Strategy, unquote. But then it went on to say that by December 2023, which is a year from now, there would be clarification of, quote, accountability for the achievement of the National Housing Strategy. Was the board happy with this response?
CMHC is responsible for housing, funding the capital expenditure required for housing, for homelessness issues. Infrastructure, the department that we're very closely with, is responsible for the Reaching Home program. In order to achieve the chronic homelessness targets, it requires CMHC and infrastructure working very closely together, but because of the nature of homelessness, it also requires very close collaboration between all levels of government and nonprofit groups. And we're committed to doing that to ensure that collectively we can eliminate homelessness in Canada.
Thank you. So this strategy, the overarching strategy, started in 2017, and after the Auditor General's report, the response that you had said that a year from now, as I had just said, you will determine who has the accountability for the achievement of the National Housing Strategy. So are you saying that the CMHC is not accountable, and you're going to take a year to determine who is accountable? And if so, who would be on that list of who might be accountable if it's not the CMHC?
CMHC is accountable for the National Housing Strategy and its targets. For this particular target, we have to work in very close collaboration with the homelessness department within infrastructure, but also other levels of government and other nonprofit organizations.
So again, what you're saying is that it's going to take a year to determine who actually is accountable, even though you are the ones that are fulfilling the strategy. You wouldn't consider yourselves as being ones that would be accountable for the strategy.
I am accountable for the National Housing Strategy delivery, and as I noted in the response to the Auditor General, I take accountability for using the tools that we have to make sure that we deliver in solving chronic homelessness in Canada.
Right. Well, I guess I go back to your actual written words that were in response to the Auditor General, which says, again, I'll read it, accountability for the achievement of the National Housing Strategy, and that would be determined by December of 2023. So again, if the buck stops with you, what would be the purpose of this, saying that you'll determine a year from now who's actually accountable if you're saying that the buck stops with you, or are you saying something different?
So it's very clear that CMHC is accountable for the delivery of the National Housing Strategy. As I noted, solving for the elimination of chronic homelessness is a very complex endeavor. It requires making sure that we work very collaboratively, not only with infrastructure, but by other groups who are working to support those who are at risk of homelessness. And it's because of this complexity that we need to make sure that we have alignment and that we're working together to address the housing, the very particular housing needs of this population.
Ms. Gray, a short question.
Just a very quick question. So you had testified earlier on in answering someone's question that the CMHC does a lot of data and collects a lot of data, and yet you don't actually know how you're achieving the commitments. So are you actually disputing the analysis from the Auditor General? Because earlier you had testified that you collect a lot of data.
Mr. Chair, we do collect a lot of data. When we're accepting applications, we ask proponents to identify the vulnerable groups who will be served by the housing unit. It takes sometimes a considerable amount of time for those housing units to be constructed and for the units to be occupied. And it's for this reason that we cannot always confirm who is the ultimate recipient of the unit, who is ultimately benefiting from the unit. But we can certainly identify who the vulnerable group was identified in the actual application process.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Now to Madame Martina Serrata pour 5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses who are with us today. My question addresses the capacity of CMHC to meet with the government's intent, that is to finance a national housing strategy in order to assure housing affordability. But what we're hearing on the ground is that there's still work to be done to achieve this. And one of the reasons is that community organizations who have the best tools in hand to provide, to deliver affordable housing because they're not part of the profit-based market, find it difficult to work with CMHC. What is your answer to this? How can you better support nonprofit organizations who don't feel that they're being supported due to the bureaucratic burden and the extremely lengthy wait times that they have to go through when they work in these programs?
CMHC, for many decades, was not involved in the delivery of affordable housing, and we had lost connections with many institutions in the nonprofit sector. We've been rebuilding that capacity over the last 5 years. We've made significant improvements in our processes to support the nonprofit sector more effectively. Is there more to do? Absolutely, and we're committed to doing better in the years to come. I'd like to just turn the mic over to Nadine LeBlanc for a few words just to augment my response.
Nous travaillons étroitement avec la communauté.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to state that we have local teams who work closely with nonprofit organizations as well as entities who are involved in our programs. We have different levels of service depending on the program. It is clear that the Rapid Housing Initiative is far more rapid and much more accessible to communities, because these are programs that are at 100% contribution. When it comes to our co-funding program, it becomes somewhat more complicated because in part we have contributions as well. There are loans. When there are loans, there we also work closely with the provinces as well as other financial backers to render the application viable. So that takes a little bit more time, but if you like, we can also address the service standards we have with our clients. We're ready to answer those questions. Just a word about community organizations. I understand that, as we've heard at CMHC, you've put in place a customer service portion for nonprofit organizations. And I think that happened sometime in this spring, perhaps in June. But it's been 5 years now, since 2016. It's been a long time that the National Housing Strategy has been in place. And it's only recently that CMHC has put in place initiatives for nonprofit organizations. So what I'd like to know is, perhaps contrary to what Ms. Bauer said earlier, CMHC, in its beginning of its history, met with a request by government that is to address affordable housing. That's what it did after the Second World War. So today I'd like to know, what are you doing at CMHC to make sure that not only is there affordable housing there, but to have deep affordability. And that's what we're looking at with the community organization. So I'd like to know what you're going to do now to make sure that you will increase the level of housing affordability, which really should be available for nonprofit organizations. Let me clarify, Mr. Chair, that our local services have been in place ever since the CMHC was created. We have regional offices that deliver those services. We've increased the number over the years as we were increasing the number of programs we deliver. What's important, this is important because we have to work with the community. Just a reminder, the 2022 budget, that is what we're doing now, to add housing units that are more affordable. There, allow me to clarify that we've expanded the rapid housing initiatives. This was announced a short while ago. That's $1.5 billion that will be earmarked for assistance to persons in the greatest need. And we're continuing to review the strategy on an ongoing basis. As Ms. Bauer has said, we continue to review our programs to make sure that they take into account the economic conditions and the needs of vulnerable populations. Could you speak about your relationship with the provinces? How do you work with the provinces and territories to make sure that there is better coordination among the programs and with the different provinces? Because, again, that is also a major challenge when it comes to delivering affordable housing. Perhaps you could give us some standards as to the timelines that are in place. But how do you work through this? Because from what I understand is that the timelines are very long. So in an inflation context and in a difficult market condition, if it takes 6 months to provide an answer, then the unit will no longer be affordable. So what do you do to respond, and how will you respond to the current market? And how do you work with the provinces? And if you don't have time to give me an answer, perhaps we could do this in writing.
I think I'd like to just note, creating affordable housing is really tough. I see the work that nonprofits do, and what they have to do is use the federal money, use available provincial, municipal money. They use their own equity, and they have to layer on many layers of funding to create affordable housing. That's what it takes. And I just want to, pay tribute to the amazing work that nonprofit organizations are making. CMHC can do its part by aligning our programs with the programs of other governments. And we've learned a lot in the last 5 years, and we've seen in programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative how we can apply some of those learnings to get money out the door faster.
You, Madame Martinez-Ferreira, Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et demie.
La stratégie.
The National Housing Strategy is celebrating its 5th anniversary, so it is halfway through to its major objectives. And given the little time I have, I won't go over these. But you're saying that, yes, we agree with the recommendations by the Auditor General and the concerns expressed, and that this will be part of your action plan, but tangibly now. because there are a number that have been put in place, and several of us believe that perhaps the national strategy should be reviewed. Given the data that we have in hand, we don't quite understand how that this is going to meet with the needs of the most vulnerable and whether or not the objectives set out in the strategy being achieved. Are there timelines that meet with these objectives? We don't know. As well, in addition to that, the Auditor General has stated that it isn't known who's in charge of what. Is it Infrastructure Canada, etc.? It's just worrisome. So what are the tangible measures that you will be putting in place to ensure that the situation will change?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, the National Housing Strategy continues to evolve. It's grown from a $40 billion investment to a $70 billion investment. We've added new programs to address the housing needs of Canadians. There is a built-in process where the National Housing Strategy is reviewed on a periodic basis, and CMHC has a group that does evaluations and makes recommendations to our minister on improvements that can be made, and that was built into the National Housing Strategy. So comments and feedback from committees like this is very valuable in terms of continuing to make sure that our programs are relevant and serve the needs of Canadians, especially those most in need.
Selon vous, qui est responsable?
So according to you, who is responsible for the strategy in numbers?
CMHC is responsible for delivery of the National Housing Strategy.
Est-ce qu'à votre avis, vous...
Do you believe that you have met with expectations?
So I can give you a sense of some of the targets that we are working towards and how we reward the work of our employees. There are 6 indicators of success that were established when the National Housing Strategy was established. The first indicator is the number of households whose housing needs are reduced or eliminated. The NHS target was 540,000 households. Halfway through the program, the actual number of households that we have actually helped is 246,000. The NHS targeted the creation of 160,000 new units of housing. Halfway through the program, we have delivered financial commitments to 114,000 units. That's 62% of the target met. We have made commitments to repair and renew existing social housing. The target for the NHS was 300,000. To date, we have extended funding to 272,000 units. That is a 91% achievement halfway through the housing strategy. We have committed to protect 385,000 units of community housing. Halfway through the strategy, we have provided support to 220,000 community housing units. That's a 57% achievement. We provided, we made another commitment to provide housing affordability support to 300,000 households through the Canada Housing Benefit. To date, we have provided 100,000 households with that benefit. And we have committed that at least 25% of the NHS funding goes to meet the housing needs of women and children. The target was 25%, and to date, we have achieved 30%. So according to those measures, we feel that we're meeting the original intent of the programs.
See Madame Chabot and Ms. Bowers. I will now go to Ms. Kwan for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, I must say, some of that data is not particularly meaningful if you don't actually get into the details of the affordability and how it's actually met the need. And I think that's the point that the Auditor General is raising in this report. The corporation took the position that it was not directly accountable for the achievement of the strategy's target to reduce chronic homelessness by 50% by the year 2027-2028. Is that still the corporation's position? Just yes or no?
That target is a shared accountability between CMHC and Infrastructure Canada.
So is CMHC accountable? Because it said it's not. So you're now saying you will take joint responsibility with Infrastructure Canada. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. CMHC has funding for the capital costs of housing that is built to address chronic homelessness. Infrastructure is responsible for the Reaching Home program.
Thank you. I understand how the programs work. Now, is it CMHC's opinion that the government will in fact meet this target?
Homelessness is a very challenging area of effort. It requires not only the housing support, but it requires wraparound services and other supports provided by other levels of government.
Sorry, I'm just looking, I have very limited time. So is it your opinion that CMHC will actually meet this target as the government has laid out?
The target was set prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has worsened the homelessness situation in Canada.
Sorry, then is your answer no? Sorry, I don't have enough time, so if you can just give me a short yes or no.
It is a very challenging target to meet.
So you're telling me that is not, because that's what the Auditor General is saying, that is not going to achieve the Federal National Housing Strategy target of reducing chronic homelessness by 50% by 2027-2028 fiscal year. What I'm hearing is that you're echoing that as well. Unless if it's different, and if you want to provide something more fulsome in writing to the committee, please do so through to the chair. The issue around the co-investment fund, right now, my understanding is CMHC has reduced the amount of funding to community groups to where they can only receive $25,000 per unit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what will happen for community groups who require more than $25,000 to achieve their project? If they don't get it, there's only two ways to go. One, the affordability criteria will not be met, or two, the project is not viable.
We look at projects on an individual basis. We do have targets like, the $25,000 target per unit that you mentioned, but we always look at projects on an individual basis and do what we can to make sure that the projects are viable and they succeed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if I can submit written questions.
You can.
As other members is doing.
Yes. Ms. Falk, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. As it was stated earlier, as you said, the CMHC has agreed with the auditor's finding and recommendations. And I'm just wondering, in response to some of my colleagues' questions around the table here, you had said that CMHC is working judiciously to implement the auditor's recommendations. If so, what has been done?
So in terms of on the data issue, and this has actually happened. The recommendation. So in terms of improving the quality of data, we are doing work with Statistics Canada to improve information about the individuals who are occupying the units that we're funding. So that's one initiative. In terms that work has already started. We're also always continuously improving our reporting and increasing the transparency of the information that we provide to the public. So that's the second item on the data item. In terms of accountability and working in greater collaboration with Infrastructure Canada, we have established an ADM level working group to make sure that we can better coordinate the programs that we have at CMHC, the housing financing programs, with the homelessness program that's implemented through Infrastructure Canada.
So a working group. So when will that be put into action?
So one working group is already in place. We feel that there's...
sorry, like the working group work completed and then put into action. Because, we could sit and have groups and meetings to have meetings to have meetings and do nothing. So I'm just wondering what the timeline is.
It's not the kind of working group where there's it's a continuous... It works on actions on a continuous basis because we're rolling out initiatives on a continuous basis. So the aim of the meeting is to have senior level officials working together. So, for example, as we roll out the Rapid Housing Initiative Round 3, we're working with Infrastructure Canada to understand the needs in their communities and making sure...
Was this an existing group, or was this started because of the AG's report?
There was always collaboration between the two departments. This was a formal committee that was set up to address the specific recommendations made by the Auditor General.
Okay. I just want to quote something from your opening remarks here. You had said CMHC has consistently met the National Housing Strategy's ambitious targets, and we've added new programs as conditions and needs continue to evolve. But from reading the report, the success hasn't really been measured. So I'm just wondering how that fits in here.
So with respect to the reduction in chronic homelessness, that is much more difficult to measure because of the complexity of the issue. As I mentioned, it's not a matter of counting units or the level of rent or the number of people living in those units. So it requires more work and collaboration with various actors within the housing system to ensure success.
Mm-hmm. And I would say in response to that, when there's a will, there's a way. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. I would argue almost every task is difficult. But when there's a will to fix something, there is a way to get it done. I just wanted to touch on, I had heard you mention a couple times today, a delay because of construction time to move-in time. And I believe was that in regards to data collection? Or
Yes.
just in general?
The housing construction life cycle is quite long, from the design of the housing unit to the actual construction process to when the units can be actually occupied.
What's the average?
So it depends on the city. For example, in the city of Toronto, for example, it can take up to 6 years from the conception of the program of a project to actual move-in date.
And why is that?
There's a large number of reasons. Housing, especially the creation of multi-unit housing, is complex. It requires multiple levels of approvals at the municipal level. And we also have very serious shortage of skilled labor in Canada. So it's very challenging.
So red tape and bureaucracy is one of those reasons that we can't build quickly.
It can be an element, but there can also be opposition from neighborhood groups because it is very difficult to build housing, especially in Toronto or other large cities.
Okay, thank you. I also want to quickly, I think my time is running here. I also want to quickly ask about Infrastructure Canada and CMHC. It seems to be that they're not aligning from reading this report. What commitments are being made other than this working group that, from the sounds of it, sounds like it was actually struck before this AG report? What is CMHC Infrastructure Canada doing to work more collaboratively?
So CMHC came under the infrastructure portfolio only fairly recently, about a year ago, and I work very closely with the officials at Infrastructure Canada, and we have collaboration at all levels of our organization, and we take the reports, the comments made by the Auditor General seriously, and in the way we work on a day-to-day basis, we make sure that there's alignment between our work and the work of the Infrastructure Department. By, for example,
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
I just on a personal level, as the head of CMHC, I work very closely with the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure, Kelly Gillis. So that's one example. Nadine, who is the head of policy, works very closely with their head of policy, and that level of collaboration exists throughout the organization.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. Mr. Long for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and thank you to CMHC and Ms. Bowers for coming before us today. I want to start with co-op housing, and my riding of St. John Rothsay through Housing Alternatives has a wonderful project moving forward in the co-op housing sector. And we know that co-op housing is critical when it comes to expanding the supply of affordable housing. And through the budget 2022, our government is making the largest investment in the expansion of co-op housing in 30 years. I mean, like to your point earlier, it's been a long time. Can you speak to how the work CMHC is already doing with the co-op sector, as well as the work being done to partner with that sector in the rollout of these new investments? Thank you.
I'm a member of the National Housing Council, and the head of the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada is also a member. So I have very close collaboration and conversations with that individual. In addition to that, you mentioned that in the most recent budget, there was a $1.5 billion commitment to create new co-op housing in Canada. This is quite transformational because there hasn't been federal investments in co-op housing for many decades. CMHC is working collaboratively with the Co-op Housing Federation to co-develop that strategy. It's not ready for prime time yet, but there's been a lot of work in terms of program design, in terms of making a program that's really going to create the new generation of co-op housing in Canada.
Thank you. And Ms. Bowers, I have another, I want to give you an analogy. I, in my past life, was president of a hockey team. I talk about it often, the St. John Sea Dogs. And as president of that team, if I consistently had season ticket holders come back to me, or season ticket holders out in my community saying, oh, dealing with the St. John Sea Dogs is difficult, and dealing with the St. John Sea Dogs has been cumbersome. As the head of the St. John Sea Dogs, I would have recognized that there's a problem internally. Maybe it's culturally, maybe it's process, bureaucracy, what have you. And, you know, we have some great proponents in my riding. Two of them, to be perfectly blunt, I mean, I've seen them age before my eyes over the last few years, trying to get through the co-investment process, the frustration, the delays. Another one, which is a shelter, which was funded through Rapid Housing. I'm very appreciative of that. I mean, she used to call me at times so frustrated, you know, to be blunt again, she was crying. She just couldn't get through the process. So I ask you sincerely, as the head of CMHC, do you recognize, and I'll qualify it, like I know, as you said earlier, it's very, very difficult. It's complex to move forward with affordable housing, and there's a lot of challenges, right? Whether it's, you know, to get builders to build it, cost per door, what have you. But as the head of CMHC, do you recognize that there are problems with the process? You know, I've always said I'd like to see CMHC become less bureaucratic and more entrepreneurial. And I know that that's not easy, but sometimes it seems like a lot of the nonprofits just get so frustrated because it just seems like they just have one barrier after another, and I know there's process in place. But can you just comment on that as the head of CMHC, what you see, what you recognize, and what you can do potentially to turn that around? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I take comments like this very seriously. I am responsible for the culture and processes at CMHC, so I welcome feedback like this. I really, you know, when I meet MPs at gatherings like this, I always encourage them, if there are pain points that they're experiencing with projects and why, please let me know, because it's really important for me to look into it so I can learn from the process. We have, as I mentioned previously, we have learned the lessons from the rollout of the co-investment funds. Definitely, the processes were too cumbersome and too bureaucratic. We have tried to simplify them. We talked, I think Yannick talked earlier about, we have a contribution-only stream for the co-investment fund where we can actually get back to proponents within 4 to 6 weeks. So we've decoupled the loan process from the contribution process to make things easier. We also have instituted a process where after every client interaction, we have a very simple survey that we send out to clients, and we actually measure the level of client satisfaction. And when the level of client satisfaction is not satisfactory, we take actions to remediate that.
I'll just jump in. Are you able to share what the level of satisfaction's been?
We're very happy to provide that.
Okay. Am I done?
Concluded. Mr. Long, but did you get the last point in from Mr. Long? And you're going to
yes,
provide that to the committee?
I think the question was to provide our levels of client satisfaction. We can certainly provide that.
Thank you. Ms. Ferrari, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I have a question, if I may. How many mortgages do you believe will default in the next 24 months?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the ability to forecast things like that, but I can assure you that at CMHC, we take risk management very seriously. We run a commercial mortgage loan insurance business. We conduct stress testing to ensure that we have enough capital to ensure that we're protected against loss. Currently, the levels of arrears are very, very low, less than 0.5% of our entire book, which is incredibly low. I know that we're going through some very difficult economic times, but to date, because of the strong employment picture, we are not seeing losses coming through our mortgage book. And this is not to say we're complacent. We are monitoring the environment continually and to ensure that we have enough capital to withstand any losses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, under your joint mission statement, it says by 2030, this is under CMHC, you know this, by 2030, everyone in Canada will have a home that they can afford and that meets their needs. Are you familiar with that statement?
Mr. Chair, I am familiar with that statement.
So if you're not meeting the needs now, what is your plan to achieve that by 2030?
So our 2030 goal is like our North Star. It's what guides the work of all our employees. It is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and we aspire to achieve that through effective delivery of the National Housing Strategy, through the effective delivery of our commercial programs, but we also feel that CMHC has a very important role in providing housing market insights through the reports drafted by people like Mr. Bob Dugan, who's on the call today. And in addition to that, we have contacts with many players in the housing market, be they nonprofit organizations, private developers, and we feel that CMHC has a very important role as a convener in making sure that all players in the housing sector work together to provide affordable housing for all Canadians.
Thank you. So if you don't meet that goal, what happens? Is there any recourse? Is it just a pie in the sky? There's no actual enforcement of it?
I view that as an aspirational statement. It's like our moonshot. It's like our North Star that guides our activity. It's probably likely that we're not going to achieve it, but we feel that there's a lot of value in trying for it. If you don't aim high and try for it, you're not going to get there. Our goal is to say that that 2030 goal is CMHC's aspiration, but we feel that it should be the aspiration for all Canadians. And we've been really encouraged by other housing organizations actually adopting that goal, because I feel like housing is a team sport. By all sectors of Canadian society working together, we feel that's the best way to achieve housing affordability for all.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I would push back a little bit and say a plan and measurable targets would be a lot better than an aspirational goal. So when you are spending $4.5 billion of taxpayers' money and you can't gauge homelessness, and I know in my community of Peterborough Kawartha, there is more tent cities. There are people who are struggling. I'm very confused why it's so complex you can't gauge that. I think that's very frustrating to Canadians and people who are watching so many people suffer. I want to give you a very specific example, if I can. In my riding of Peterborough Kawartha, there are people trying to really work to solve the housing crisis. And Peterborough Housing Corporation currently has an application for an 85-unit build with a mix of senior, affordable, supportive, and at-market units. As of today, there are 344 people on the by name priority list. 27 are 65 years of age or older, and 60 are 55 years of age or older. 10% of the people who are 55 years of age or older are currently living outdoors. As of September 16th, 202 people are on the wait list for assisted living in Peterborough through our VON. So I wrote a letter to the Minister of Housing asking for support through CMHC, and it has come back to me. The Minister has put it back on CMHC to see what you guys will do. It says, the National Housing Strategy is helping those most in need find a place to call home. This includes seniors, persons with disability, those dealing with mental health addictions as well. And so you have sent back a note here to this organization that has got approval, much to what you were saying. The neighbors are supportive, the community is supportive, they're solving that gap, they're closing that gap, they're helping. And it is said that the situation has come up that CMHC is placing this funding in jeopardy. And they are very frustrated because you have not communicated with them in a timely manner. And I know you're at the top, and maybe you don't know that this is going on. And to my colleague, Mr. Long, who has said, brought this up and you said you care, but these are the real stories of things that are not being completed because of the bureaucracy. So I don't want an aspirational statement, with all due respect. I'd like to know, how do you prevent this from happening, and what is your response to these people that are waiting on these homes?
Thank you. And could we get to the point with your answer, Ms. Bowers?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate feedback like this. We have housing representatives, spread across Canada. I will take this particular project away, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari. Mr. Coteau, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for being here today. I'm fairly new to government, well, at least to the House of Commons.
Microphone, please.
I know that this program, this initiative, the $72 billion that's been invested is being an incredible initiative to help Canadians. I've always associated home ownership to reaching, the Canadian dream of participating fully in society. And I also know that you've only had about 5 years to kind of rebuild a program that was lost really for decades. Governments in the past did not invest properly into this area, and a $72 billion investment is going to have a huge impact on helping Canadians. So my question to you is, what were some of the biggest challenges? Because you mentioned that you had to reconnect with organizations on the ground. What were some of the big challenges over the last 5 years your organization had to go through to reconnect, to rebuild, and to reestablish Canada, the Canadian government, as a major player in home affordability challenges?
Mr. Chair, that in answer to that question, CMHC has gone through tremendous changes over the last 5 years. Prior to the National Housing Strategy, CMHC was focused on its commercial mandate. We were delivering mortgage insurance products and working primarily with the financial institution sector. The National Housing Strategy represented a return after 3 decades and working with clients of a totally different type. So we've had to reestablish ties with the nonprofit community. We've had to work more closely with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, and that's required a retooling of our processes, our technology, but possibly most importantly, a change in culture at CMHC. This focus on client service, understanding the specific needs of the nonprofit sector, those are things that we have improved, but it's a continuous learning process.
It's a different culture.
Yeah.
I know that some of the programs, like the Rapid Housing Program, now is in its third phase. A program like that, which is highly successful, going from first to third phase, what have you learned in a program specifically like that? How have you made improvements?
There's a large number of examples, but we have simplified the application process. We've made the portal more accessible. We've identified specialized client groups who can support proponents who are applying. We have learned to get the funding out the door more quickly. And I have to say, it's actually easier to get funding out the door because the due diligence is much less complicated for a grants program than a loan program. But we've taken a lot of lessons to simplify our processes. In terms of legal agreements, our legal group has worked tirelessly to simplify them. And again, I want to always point out that there's always a tension between client experience and speeding up the process and making sure we have the right checks and balances to make sure that government funds are being used for their intended purpose. So there's always a little bit of a tension, but we're trying to make sure that we have good governance, but at the same time have good client experience. And there's many more examples I can give, but it's that cultural change element. As you know, from my experience, it takes time to change the culture of an organization. And I've been at CMHC as CEO for 1.5 years, and I can assure you that CMHC employees are very committed. And not that we're perfect, but we're trying our best to learn from our mistakes and do our best to serve Canadians.
Data collection. A lot of organizations now have started to lean in towards disaggregated race-based data. I know there's huge discrepancies in housing when it comes to home ownership among different communities. I also know that I think it's Statistics Canada has about 150 million earmarked specifically for the collection of data, disaggregated race-based data. Any plans in the future to tap into that type of collection?
Yeah, CMHC works very closely with Statistics Canada, specifically on those race-based housing statistics. And you're absolutely right. There are very different housing outcomes depending on race. For example, on home ownership, there's a 30% differential between home ownership rates of Black Canadians versus white Canadians. So these are things CMHC's Policy and Research Group has done a number of reports to highlight these discrepancies. And it's our intent, there's a lot of gaps in housing data, and CMHC is working as quickly as we can to close those gaps.
Years ago, some of the research done where you have some communities closer to 20% and some as high as 85% home ownership. So the gap is extreme in some cases. So I'm happy that the organization's tapped into that, that type of research, and I look forward to seeing some updates on that in the future.
So, Madame Chabot pour deux et demi. Madame Chabot.
Thank you very much. Well, with all due respect, I'd like to come back to a part of your answer regarding the processes and the changing culture, the need of having to adapt to all of this. But there is the obligation to achieve results. It is not only the obligation of means. I have the sense that we are talking in a kind of jargon, which for those persons waiting really don't provide answers. But that is with all due respect. And I'm saying this because the National Housing Strategy's objectives was to reduce chronic homelessness by 50% by 2027, 2028. That's in 5 years. Right now, the Auditor General says that it's impossible to even have data. And another very concrete example is that the Auditor General recently didn't know or had noted that organization, including CMHC, didn't know whether or not the efforts made to date truly had improved housing conditions for vulnerable persons. Would you have a comment on that?
Mr. Chair, with respect to the Auditor General's report on homelessness, CMHC has accepted the recommendations and findings of that report. We are working very hard to address them. We understand and appreciate the very great need that is being experienced by Canadians who are at risk of homelessness or are homeless. And we're going to do the best that we can with all the resources that we have to address this problem in the coming years.
Je vous demandais une question très concrète.
I had asked a very concrete question. If you don't have time to answer, please send us the answer in writing. Could you say who lives in those housing units built with the collaboration of CMHC as part of these programs? Who actually lives in these housing units?
We do collect this information, and we will provide this information as the housing units are built and the units are occupied by the residents.
Donc, Monsieur le Président, je comprends qu'à date, on ne sait pas.
Mr. Chair, today I understand that we don't know who occupies them, we don't know under which conditions, and we don't know when. Mr. Chair, that is quite worrisome.
Madame Chabot, do you want to respond, Ms. Bowers?
I believe MP Kwan made a data request about the very specific information that was being requested by Madame Chabot, and we will provide that as requested.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. Madame Zerillo for 2.5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony today. So I hear that there is no confidence in the National Housing Strategy targets being met in the current format. The market-driven focus that CMHC has taken is not working for the most vulnerable. And it seems that the federal housing advocate is urging change of approach, more of a human rights-based approach to housing. It was mentioned a number of times today that current results are by design and by policy. So my question, Ms. Bowers, is do you plan to make immediate changes to policy and design in the National Housing Strategy, and what are those changes?
The National Housing Strategy is comprised of a number of initiatives that provides housing across the housing continuum. We have programs that provide close to market housing, but most of our programs are intended to support Canadians in need. And we track the housing units that are financed through the programs and provide transparency about the units that are being financed. I think when I think about the grants and loans that are being made available through our programs, we provide the deepest level of funding to those housing providers that provide the most social benefit.
So sorry to interrupt because I don't have much time. So are there changes coming to the market focus to move more to supporting vulnerable?
So I don't agree that the National Housing Strategy is market focused. It depends on the program. The most of our funding is going to those in need, and I think it's mostly the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, which is 100% loan-based programs that provides close to market housing. But in terms of the deep subsidies for affordable housing, the bulk of our programs is going to nonprofits and other levels of government.
And those nonprofits knew that operating agreements were expiring over the last 10 years. I've known for 10 years that operating agreements were going to expire. I'm going to ask a little bit about the rapid housing agreements, and nothing was done on those expiring operating agreements. I have an order paper question here on the Rapid Housing Initiative, and I just wanted to understand and underfunded. So how many Rapid Housing Initiative applications were denied federal funding? In the round one, there was 12,000 units approximately. In round two, it was reduced to 5,000 units. Can you give us an idea of why those projects were denied? I see in Nunavut as little as 12.5% of programs in round one supported. Can you tell us some information on why they weren't funded?
Yeah. The Rapid Housing Initiative is our most generous funding program. There were many more applications than there were actually funding available. And I don't have the specific units, as you mentioned, but for example, in the first round of the initiative, there was $1 billion of funding available, and we received over $6 billion in applications. So we had...
I don't have much time, sorry, Ms. Bowers, but could you in follow-up just let us know what was the criteria for choosing? What was the decision tree for choosing? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we're finished. Thank you.
Zerillo, and that will be provided to the committee, the answer to her question.
Yes, our criteria are very transparent, and the scoring criteria are provided publicly.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Aitchison, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bowers, we know that the CMHC over 2020 and 2021 paid out about $48 million over those 2 years in staff bonuses. And I'm wondering, can you tell us what the bonus pool is for 2022?
The bonuses for, I think the question is, what is the bonus pool for 2021-22?
No. How much will the bonus pool be for 2022 specifically?
So that determination has not been made. We're not at the end of year, and we're just going through the end of performance evaluations for our employees.
Sorry, you reported back at Public Accounts last week that it was $30 million for 2022. Is that a rough estimate?
That's a rough estimate, yes.
Okay, so it's a rough estimate of 30 million.
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess what I'm struggling with is, when we think about bonus, we think about, a really exceptional job being done. And, the Parliamentary Budget Office has reported over the first 3 years of the National Housing Strategy, the CMHC spent less than half of the funding allocated for two key initiatives, one of which, of course, is the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, which only spent about 50% of its allocated dollars over those 3 years. We know, too, that the Auditor General has reported that many of those units weren't, in fact, affordable. We know that inflation is actually meaning now that a lot of the funds that are being invested don't go as far because, of course, inflation is a bit out of control. We know that, in general, the housing situation is getting worse, and it's not just the homeless situation, although it's bad. 216 people died in Toronto last year. That's over 4 people per week. That's double what it was in 2017. Home prices are, more than double in the last 7 years. The National Bank of Canada said in the second quarter of 2020, the mortgage on a home now takes about 63.9% of income to service. That's the highest it's been since 1982. The PBO has reported that, an average of $118 million a year was spent on homelessness programs, but bumped up to $357 million a year, and yet homelessness continues to be on the rise. And of course, we don't really know exactly where this money is being spent, if it's actually having the impact we want it to have. And so, what I struggle with, and I think what a lot of Canadians struggle with, is how we can come up with a bonus pool of $30 million, whatever it might be, when we've made some progress, we've done some good things here, and I've no doubt that everybody at the CMHC means well, but bonuses should be based on results, and the results just aren't really there. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Mr. Chair, I provided a number of indicators that we measure success by in terms of number of housing units created, repaired, number of households aided, and we're on track to meet those targets. In terms of allocated budget being used within a calendar year, I do have to note that the construction cycle is difficult to determine. So sometimes we commit money for a certain fiscal year, but the fiscal year doesn't align perfectly with the construction cycle. So sometimes we have to change the allocation of money from one year to the next, and that's what results in money being not used within a specific calendar year.
Well, I'm going to give you a couple of examples in Parry South Muskoka, where organizations, well-meaning community organizations like Community Living South Muskoka, they had the land, they had everything lined up, they got all the approvals in place to build, units for folks that were desperately needed, and by the time it got to the CMHC process, they gave up and sold the land. They just stopped. I can give you example after example after example of that. The Canadians see the results, and they're not good enough. Is the CMHC the right vehicle to be delivering on housing affordability for this country?
There's no doubt that, especially in the early years of the co-investment fund, there were many pain points in our processes. We've made significant improvements in the processing times, and we're working really hard to serve the needs of the amazing nonprofit groups that are working in ridings like that were just mentioned. I'm very happy to get feedback about specific pain points that MPs are experiencing and actioning them.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'd actually like to talk to you more about it, because as much as it maybe feels like we're just attacking you here, this is a really serious issue, and it's probably one of the most important reasons that made me decide to run here. Because as a mayor, we were doing all kinds of things in my community to support the development of affordable housing, to support housing in general, and what was missing in our community was a reliable federal partner, and that was the CMHC. It was impossible for different groups to get money out of the CMHC. And so I appreciate that everyone cares, and I think that when the National Housing Strategy was launched, it was launched with a great fanfare, and everybody cares. But if we're not delivering the results that Canadians deserve, then we need to regroup. And and we talk about who's accountable. And you talked about housing being a team sport, and I agree with you 1,000%. It's not just all levels of government and the private sector, but even within this government, it feels like no one's the captain of the team. And I think that's what Canadians are struggling with the most right now. So I definitely want to continue the conversation with you to see what we can all be doing to work better, to deliver results for Canadians, because there's been a lot of promises made, and there's more people homeless today than there was before we started this. So I appreciate your time here.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. A quick response, Ms. Bowers, and then we'll go to Mr. Coteau.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate comments like this. CMHC has made significant improvements in the delivery of our national housing strategy. We are meeting the targets that we have committed to. The Rapid Housing Initiative is an example of CMHC getting money out the door very quickly to help those in need. The turnaround time has been quite remarkable, and we feel that the Rapid Housing Initiative success has only been made possible because of the lessons we've learned from our other programs. We're a learning organization, and I welcome feedback like this so we can continue to improve and deliver for Canadians.
Bowers, Mr. Aitchison. Mr. Van Bynen for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been very informative for me, and And having spent 30 years in banking institutions, I understand how difficult it is to manage portfolios. But as Mr. Aitchison has said earlier, I've also had some experiences where individuals have approached or taken on or wanted to develop projects and have simply become frustrated and walked away from the project. In fact, there is one group that actually had to engage a consultant that would take them into the application process and then manage that other and manage the funding application and working that through. And we can talk about that in detail. But the frustrating thing is that smaller community groups simply don't have those resources. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about the support that you're talking about in terms of the resources that you're supplying to smaller community groups.
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. I'd like to turn this over to Yannick Monahan, who's our Director of Client Services. He's probably in the best position to provide more detail about how we're working to better support smaller communities and community organizations.
Yes, thank you, Romy. Mr. Chair, we work directly with housing providers across the country to help them from cradle to grave. So support them from the development of an application to the financing of that project and see it through all the way through the construction if the proponent's successful. We've put things in place in order to determine their readiness and help them develop a plan on how to address any gaps that they may have in their project, whether it's a lack of property management experience, a lack of construction experience, to make sure that they associate with partners in the community that can support them in order to deliver, to see their project through, in order to serve the community that they intend to serve.
Wondering if there is a summary of that project that could be shared with the committee, so that could be part of our record as well. And another measure that I'd like to know about and see if you do measure this is that, do you have any data on the number of applications that were started but not completed?
Yes, we do have that information.
Okay, if you could share that with us. And again, going back to process, how many end-to-end process reviews have you undertaken for the borrowing cycle, for the application cycle? And if you have taken them, what's the average timeline? And what are the process improvement goals that you ask from your management team?
So we have a process improvement group at CMHC who works with the business. I don't have that specific information at hand right now, but maybe I can ask Yannick just comment on a very general level, and we can provide the specific details later if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, Romy. Mr. Chair, so the timelines vary by program. I'll take an example of the two programs that were talked about the most today, the Co-Investment Fund and the Rental Construction Initiative, as well as the Rapid Housing Initiative. We try to connect with proponents and give them clarity relative to the likely outcomes of their program within 2 weeks of their initial submission. And we work with them towards developing a successful application and see it through funding. And that can take, as you would know, having been in the banking sector for some time, in and around 6 to 7 months in order to completely understand the risks that we're facing and put a plan in place to mitigate them to make sure that they can deliver a successful project. We've made a number of changes in order to take in the feedback that we received from proponents on the co-investment program. We received some feedback that for smaller proponents, the loan and contribution stream were difficult to navigate. And so we made sure to develop a program that was right size for those organizations. That's when we launched in May the contribution only program, which allowed them to access funding within 4 weeks. And so we've put things in place like this across our various programs to make sure that we adjust to the feedback of the proponents that we deal with.
So with those average figures and numbers, I'm going to assume that that's part of the improvement in those processes are part of the criteria for the management bonuses that provide some performance incentives. Now, Did I hear you right when you said your arrears are only 0.5 of 1%?
Mortgage insurance book, yes.
Wow. Did it occur to CMHC that we might be a little too stingy?
I don't think this is just unique to CMHC. When you look at the whole mortgage market in Canada, there's been a very low level of arrears. The biggest factor that drives arrears is unemployment. And to date, the employment situation in Canada is very strong. And I also want to highlight arrears is a lagging indicator. And so what we often look at is arrears in the credit card book and other non-secured lending, because oftentimes the arrears rates for those actually get higher before the mortgages do. So we look at those on a regular basis, and to date, Canadians are paying their bills, and we are vigilant, but we don't have any immediate concerns about our mortgage book.
Be able to provide us with the data that talks about your delinquency rate incomparable to, say, the big 5 banks?
Yes, we're very happy to provide that. We actually provide information on a quarterly basis as part of our quarterly reporting, but we're very happy to pull the latest information for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Your time is up. Now, Ms. Gray for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It was really quite enlightening, I think, with the testimony that we had here today when you had referred to the National Housing Strategy goals as being pie in the sky. And I think maybe aspirational was another word that you used. And, if we look at the government, at the Liberals' housing plan, they reference it as a home, period, for everyone, period. We have a comprehensive plan that will unlock home ownership, and then it lists a number of objectives of the plan. It also says our commitments, and then it lists commitments. And I'll just point out 2 commitments because I think they're relevant to the conversation that we're having here today. One says help renters become owners, and the other one is end chronic homelessness. So, based on that, based on the communication that's coming out from the government talking about, a plan and talking about commitments, those are very definitive. So it sounds like there's a real misalignment with what you're saying here today, that in fact this housing strategy is a pie in the sky, sort of aspirational ideas. It's not really something that's achievable.
Mr. Chair, I want to clarify that for the National Housing Strategy, there are very clear targets. For example, 540,000 households whose housing needs are reduced, the creation of 160,000 new units of housing, the repair of 300,000 housing units, the protection of 385,000 community housing units, 300,000 households provided affordability supports through the Canada Housing Benefits, 25% of all funding going to women and children. Those are very concrete measures. With respect to CMHC's aspiration, our 2030 goal that by 2030, all Canadians have a home that they can afford that meets their needs, that is not the goal of the National Housing Strategy. That is the goal of CMHC. It is our North Star that guides our activities, and it is aspirational in nature. But I want to make sure there's a clarity between CMHC's aspiration and the very specific goals of the National Housing Strategy.
Thank you. Well, I know that, as I mentioned, one that we're talking about a lot here today is the Auditor General's report about ending chronic homelessness, and it is a commitment from the government to end chronic homelessness, and yet the Auditor General's report clearly says that we've talked a lot about here today that we have this $4.5 billion spend. We don't know if it's successful. We don't know what it's achieving, and it's all laid out in the report. So that's really, really concerning. But I wanted to go ask you a few other questions. One of the things that you had mentioned was talking about the barriers of housing affordability, and one of which was red tape and bureaucracy by different levels of government. And so is that in fact a barrier to affordability of housing in the country? What's adding to it is this bureaucracy and red tape that we're seeing at different levels of government? Is that making it more difficult?
So, Mr. Chair, housing is very local. Housing construction is very local. I talk to developers and not-for-profit housing developers all the time, and it is very difficult to work through the levels of permitting and approvals required at the local level. In Budget 2022, there was a new initiative announced by the government called the Housing Accelerator Fund. CMHC is in the process of developing that, and the purpose of that fund is to provide incentives at the municipal level to unlock those barriers at the local level. And I don't want to always cast, I know there's many ex-municipal politicians in the room. It's very easy to point fingers in the housing space, and sometimes the barriers are not because of bureaucracy, but it's also because of things like neighborhood opposition, the lack of skilled trades in specific neighborhoods. And so housing is complex and the barriers are complex, and it's up to each municipal government or locality to address those.
Great, thank you. Would another way that it's making it more difficult for affordable building of affordable housing be inflation? Would that be definitely adding and making it more difficult?
When I talk to many developers and also nonprofit providers, they have noted that construction costs have gone up. Interest rates, real estate is a very interest rate sensitive business, and increasing interest rates definitely does impact the housing development process.
Thank you. Would another barrier to building affordable housing also be the low Canadian dollar? Because the Canadian dollar is not going as far, and we know that there's a lot of items that are imported. There's lumber, whether it's refrigerators and other things. So will that also be making it more difficult to meet affordable housing objectives?
So on that, I think I'll call on Bob Dugan, who's our chief economist. I think he may be more familiar with the impact of the low Canadian dollar on the housing supply challenge.
Well, actually, if I may, just because of time here, I'm almost out of time. Yeah, if we can maybe table that information, if there's an analysis on that or any information, if we could table that for this committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And that information will be provided to the committee?
Just to confirm the impact of the low Canadian dollar on housing supply creation. That's the request. I will provide that.
Thank you. Mr. Collins for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'll be sharing my time with MP Long. If I could, through you, there seems to be near unanimity around the table that some of the programs are working very well. I think we're agreed, almost all agreed, that the Rapid Housing Initiative has worked very well for our clients in serving municipalities and not-for-profits. And you've pivoted to that program many times when we've been critical of the strategy itself, and I think for good reason. It's worked. Some of the other questions, though, around the other programs, I think, are indicative of the fact that we are struggling to understand why we're not serving more of the population who we would consider vulnerable. And so how do we change the strategy? I asked you in my first round of questioning, through you, Mr. Chair, about a reset. And so if we don't believe that the record supports that we're providing are reaching the target populations, what direction do we need to give you and the board to reset those programs to ensure that it's not, that the majority isn't going to the not-for-profits and municipalities? I want to see the vast majority of the resources we provide flow through to those organizations that are serving our most vulnerable population. So what do you need from us to change those programs so that they're reaching those goals and reaching those populations? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, housing affordability is a function of the level of funding that's available. And I'm not talking about loans, but the level of grant funding. Real estate development is a very risky venture, and it's very expensive to build new housing in Canada. And the rent is a function of the level of equity and the level of grant funding that's available to the proponents. My view is that it's not a sole federal government responsibility to provide that funding, but all levels of government need to be very serious about supporting the affordable housing sector, and the way to do that is to provide more generous contributions to the nonprofit sector.
To be clear, just through you, Mr. Chair, you're the one that's created the programs. So your board has not just created those programs, you're managing them as well. So if we're not satisfied with performance around the table, and this, we all have different political stripes here, what do we need to do? What direction do we need to say, you know what, it hasn't gone far enough. What you've experimented with in some areas isn't working. We need that to change. What direction do you need from us?
So I believe that greater investments for deeply affordable funding is absolutely necessary. However, I have to also note that the housing system is one system. And you need to also have a market housing system that also is functioning well. And as we've noted in many of your research reports, there is a big disconnect between the demand for market housing and the supply. And when the market is not working well, it puts pressure all across the housing system. And it's for this reason I think there is a public policy benefit in the government supporting all aspects of the housing system. Definitely the bulk of the grant funding should go to the nonprofit sector, but it's also super important to focus on the entire market. For example, I and CMHC is a big believer that we have a deficit of rental housing. Purpose-built rental housing in Canada. We have not built rental housing in scale for many decades, and there is a public policy benefit in supporting the creation of more rental housing.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again. I just want to go back to some of the nonprofits in my riding that had trouble getting through the system. So what would you do right now to improve that? Like I had nonprofits that had to hire consultants, had to hire architects, engineers, what have you, because they just couldn't navigate that system. So what changes could you immediately make with CMHC to help those nonprofits?
So I would encourage the nonprofits in your area to reconnect with their client representative. I would also focus on CMHC, working not only with the nonprofit, but the provincial and municipal government to make sure that the various housing programs that we have available at the various levels of government are aligned. Because I know that for nonprofits to make their project work, they need not only CMHC funding, but funding from other sources. So we can do a lot better job of making that alignment to happen.
Do your reps get out in the field much?
We have employees across Canada, and I think most of them are on the field all the time meeting proponents. So if they haven't come out to meet the proponents in the clients in your riding, very happy to send our staff to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. You had 10 seconds left. It's gone now. Thank you, Mr. Bowers. A quick question to Madame Chabot and Madame Zarrillo to conclude. Madame Chabot, do you have a question?
J'ai pas de minute.
I don't have a minute. I'm to ask a question without having a minute. No, you have 2 minutes. 2.5. Very well, and a half. I'll begin. Mr. Chair, and to you, the witnesses, because you are responsible for implementing the National Housing Strategy programs that you, in fact, have created. So what do we do as of now to ensure that either we completely change the strategy because it is a failure, and we might see that as a failure, inasmuch as we understand that the programs are not agile enough to provide answers to very specific questions. That is, how many housing units are accessible to vulnerable persons? How many housing units are accessible for persons with disabilities? And how many units have enabled homeless persons to find a housing unit? If these are very specific objectives, if you can't answer those questions, then I think we have a real serious problems. And let me say it like this. We have two choices: to continue to render their programs more agile, or to throw out the baby with the bathwater. That would not be a solution.
Mr. Chair, we will continue to take feedback from this committee, and we welcome that. I do not agree that with the statement that the National Housing Strategy has been a failure. It's been a very significant change in terms of the federal government's involvement in housing. We have learned many lessons along the way and have improved our programs. We feel that there is more to do, specifically with respect to serving vulnerable populations. And with respect to the reporting, we do collect data about the number of shelters built, the number of seniors helped, the number of women who are actually living in the housing. We can do a better job of providing more granular reporting, and we can provide more timely reporting. And I'm very committed to doing that in the years ahead.
Zerillo for 2.5.
And I want to agree with Ms. Bowers on the need for purpose-built rental. Desperately needed, and there was some tax incentives that were promised by the Liberal government that didn't transpire, and I would really encourage the government to think about tax incentives for purpose-built rental. I also wanted to just make a note on the Rapid Housing Initiative. I'm not necessarily in full agreement with my colleague there. In track 1 and 2, about 1,300 units have been built. 6,500, according to the data I just received last month, are still being built. They are either in process or still being built. So we only have 1,300 that were built. I wanted to go back to the comments that just been made about what do we do next? What do we do next to get to catch those ones that are being left behind? And I'm focused on some of the comments you made around affordability, even in the RCFI, in rental, like subsidies, being able to subsidize those ongoing operating rent subsidies maybe. Are those the kind of things that are needed from the government to get people into rental houses and to get people housed?
So with respect to the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, this is a 100% loan program that supports, its aim is to increase the supply of market rental. In order to decrease the level of rents to make the projects work, you need either greater levels of contribution or rent supplements. Those are typical tools that you need to drive down rents. In addition to that, having free land is also very helpful. As I mentioned, in order to create affordable housing, you need a whole suite of levers to drive down the costs of the housing, given the expense of creating new housing units.
And can I ask, just on the subsidize of the rental, is that an ongoing conversation about increasing subsidies? I mean, we know operating agreements are expiring. We're losing some of this really affordable rental housing. Is there a conversation at CMHC about wanting to expand subsidized rental?
So it's called the Canada Housing Benefit. So that's the sort of the rent supplement program. It's so we call it sort of backward loaded in terms of the bulk of the funding is available in the latter years of the program. The implementation of that goes through the provinces and territories, and definitely we can do greater work with the provinces and territories to make sure the Canada Housing Benefit gets to those who are most in need.
Oh, and thank you, Ms. Bowers. Ms. Bowers and those officials with CMHC, you can see the frustration came from both sides of the committee room today. But I also acknowledge that the compelling testimony that you gave to the committee on the recognition of what must change. So thank you so much for the detailed information you provided to committee. We have one more meeting on this subject, and again, thank you for being here and for the full 2 hours and taking those questions. Before we adjourn, so CMHC, you're okay to go. Just committee members received a draft of the news release announcing the Centennial Flame decision. So can I have an approval of that going public? Okay, I see a consensus on that, Madam Clerk, on the press release that you all had a draft on. Just heads up, the Supporting Black Community Report, version 2 is completed. It has a amendment from MP Ferreri, and it'll be circulated later. And the labor shortage one is being finalized, so we should be able to get to that. With that, Madame Zerillo.
Mr. Chair, in relation to that, so, I'm finding that we don't know with enough notice who's going to be coming to committee, what's planned for committee. Is there an opportunity for this committee as a whole or for the subcommittee to sit down and lay out at least the next month? I know we're breaking, but when we come back, because I am finding it difficult to to have access to information in the short window that we're given what's happening on the agenda. Sometimes in less than 24 hours, we're told this is what's on the agenda this week.
That's valid. Thank you, Madame Zarello. Sometimes it's because we get notified at a short time that somebody cannot appear as well. And so then, rather than lose it, we try to schedule something in. But it is valid. We will sit down. I prefer to do it as a committee of the whole, of everybody, and look at what motions are before the committee, and we can put a timeline in place. But at this stage, the focus is on those two studies, getting the report, and the legislation C-22 through. With that, is it the wishes of the committee to adjourn? Adjourn.